Richie, welcome to the Pandcap Show. We are so excited to have you. Can you please share a little bit about your journey with our audience?
As you mentioned, my name is Richie Serna, CEO and co-founder of Finix. A little bit about myself. I actually started my career in a rather non-traditional way. I started off in management consulting. So I did that for about 2.5 years out in New York, working at Booz Company. It wasn't necessarily the career for me. So I ended up making the jump to tech back in 2013, quitting my job and learning software engineering. So the first company that I worked at was a company by the name of Balanced. We were the first payments API for marketplaces. And after we ended up exiting that business to Stripe in 2015, I ended up starting Finix. Finix is on a mission to create the most accessible financial services ecosystem in history. And we're doing that by creating the global operating system for fintech.
Richie, what inspired you to start a company in the payment space?
After we ended up exiting to Stripe, a bunch of the engineers from Balance got recruiting attempts from these vertical SaaS companies, companies that were selling software in church industry, in the vineyard industry, in every industry you could think of, asking us to come in-house and build out payment systems for them. And so that was sort of the light bulb moment of, we've developed this really incredible domain expertise in this complex industry. What if we started turning this into a company? And so as we started to see, there was definitely an evolution in the payments ecosystem over the last few years. And one of the things we started to notice was that basically every software company is becoming a payment company. And you may not even notice it. One of my favorite stories is Macy's, for example. They make over 45% of their revenue and profit from their credit card business. And so they are a retail business that is really a payments business behind the scenes. And we've seen this playbook over and over again.
So you pioneered the Cap Table Coalition. Can you tell our audience a little bit about what that is, why it was important to start it, and how things are going?
The Cap Table Coalition is basically an organization that's on a mission to diversify Silicon Valley and the ecosystem that's there. I think what we've seen over the last few years, and ever since I moved into San Francisco, people always talk about the lack of diversity in Silicon Valley, but they traditionally focus on the employees and the teams that work at these startups. People rarely talk about the lack of diversity when it comes to the investors and the board members. And so it was probably around last summer during the time of Black Lives Matter, a lot of the big firms were talking about their focus on diversity, but when you looked at their teams, it didn't really reflect the world that they were kind of tweeting about. And so when we thought about how we could have an impact on the organization, on the ecosystem, we thought about creating more opportunities for marginalized investors, Black, Latinx, LGBTQ, women investors as well, and how we could actually take a stand. And so we ended up allocating 10% of our Series B round to Black and Latinx investors. And so we ended up having about 80 investors who invested in an SPV. And we thought of this as being a way for founders to take a stand and control who's on their cap table and create more opportunities for others. After we ended up announcing this, we got an incredible response to the announcement. And a bunch of other startup founders reached out and said, this is really cool. How can we do this? Whether they didn't have the networks into the communities or for some other reason, they really needed help with it. And so we thought, hey, how do we scale this out? And so that really became the foundation and founding story of the Cap Table Coalition. And so now we have over 300 investment members, had 16 companies who actually raised funds from the Cap Table Coalition, over 30 who've taken the pledge to do this as well. We've deployed over $16 million as well. So basically, in the first 100 days, if you were to extrapolate that amount of capital that we're now deploying, it'd be equivalent to a $200 to $300 million fund.
Well, thank you, Richie, so much. It's been wonderful having you on the Pandcap Show. We look forward to seeing your success, not only today, but in many years to come.
Thank you so much for having me.